Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Volpara's full year 2022 results call. Joining us today is CEO Teri Thomas, CFO Craig Hadfield, and Chief Science and Innovation Officer Dr. Ralph Hinem. Before I hand over to Volpara, please be advised that you're all in a listen-only mode. Today's event will include an approximately 30-minute presentation, followed by a Q&A session. To ask a question, you can either type it into the Q&A panel below or press raise hand to speak. I'd also like to remind you all that today's presentation is being recorded. I would now like to hand over to CEO Teri Thomas to formally commence the meeting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Volpara's fiscal year 2022 results, covering the 1st of April 2021 through the 31st of March 2022. We'll be walking through some key elements of the presentation that was loaded up on the ASX earlier today, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. My name is Teri Thomas. I'm Volpara's Chief Executive Officer. I'm joined by Craig Hadfield, our Chief Financial Officer, and by previous CEO and now Chief Science and Innovation Officer, Dr. Ralph Hinem. As part of our annual report, first, I'm going to introduce a bit about myself and Volpara as a company, including our new environmental, societal, and governance position. Second, Craig will present our fiscal year 2022 financial results. Ralph will then present a product and science update. And then finally, I'll share a few words about the future before we take some time at the end for Q&A with all three of us. Next slide. Of course, our standard important notice and disclaimer. On to who I am. So our founder and former CEO, Dr. Ralph Hinem, has done a fantastic job establishing a solid foundation for Volpara. Volpara was based on science and physics back from his work on breast density quantification at Oxford University. And on that foundation and under his leadership, Volpara has grown. We now have one of the largest breast image repositories in the world, and Dr. Hinem has shifted his focus to leveraging his science background and all of that data for our future growth as our Chief Science and Innovation Officer. A bit about my background. I grew up in healthcare technology, starting with implementing a registration system at a United States hospital back in 1989. I spent 20 years in various different roles for Epic, a US-based global healthcare technology leader, and I helped that company grow from half the size of Volpara into revenue over $1 billion and over 10,000 global employees. Reporting to Epic's CEO, I learned a lot about how to grow a company profitably, and I'll be taking some of those learnings and applying them to Volpara's approach to growth moving forward in this new chapter of our company's life. After I left Epic, I did move my family to New Zealand, and this is where I live now. I took the role of EVP Global Sales Marketing and Strategy for Orion Health based in Auckland. I also received my master's degree in nursing and met Volpara as a consultant advising about its acquisition of CRA Health, which, by the way, I thought was a very good idea. Over the last 18 months, I've been working closely with Ralph and Volpara as a strategic advisor before taking the CEO role about a month ago. I spent most of this last month in the United States, meeting with our sales team. I met with about half of our US-based staff. I brought a number of my Volpara team to meet with key leaders of Epic and the #2 EHR vendor in the US, Cerner. I toured Rush University Medical Center and I was impressed by their risk program, which, by the way, uses our Volpara Risk Pathways product. I attended the Society of Breast Imaging, or SBI, conference and met with several of our largest prospective customers. This time with our staff, seeing how incredibly dedicated they are to saving lives, together with getting an on-the-ground view of how we work with our customers, it reinforced for me that Volpara is a great fit for me as an individual and my personal desire to make a positive impact. Next slide. What we do matters. That line, saving families from cancer, is actually meaningful for most of our staff. Numerous coworkers have shared their stories about their personal and family experiences with cancer, and it fuels many of us in the work that we do. I find this sense of purpose quite inspiring, and it's something unusual and quite special about Volpara, and a key reason I'm happy to lead this company forward into its next phase of growth. Next slide. And for those of you not familiar with Volpara, let me tell you a little bit about us. Volpara is a software as a service health technology company whose integrated breast health platform assists in early detection of breast and other cancers. We manage multiple aspects of the breast health journey, from assessing the risk of cancer through supporting mammogram quality, mammogram image analysis, density calculations, and even communications and follow-up. Now, while there are other breast risk systems, none are as comprehensive as ours. And there are other mammography systems and even other companies that provide density information. However, we are the only company that pulls that entire journey together. We are also very well respected for our strong science and research base, which you'll hear about more a little bit later. Next slide. This slide gives you just a few numbers to orient you to our task at hand. Globally, between 1 in 7 and 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer at some point in their lives. We want to help families catch it early when it's curable. As I mentioned a minute ago, we're on a mission to save families from cancer, which, as you can see from this slide, is as important today as when the company began back in 2009. There's a lot of work for us to do, from detecting cancer earlier to empowering women to know their own density and their own risk. Next slide. That dedication to saving families from cancer is not our only way of making a positive impact. Being an ethical, principled, and responsible company has been important since our inception. You'll note in the fiscal year report, for the first time, we've started reporting on our environmental, societal, and governance position. Tracking and communicating these relevant statistics is not done just for shareholders, but also for many of our staff, our partners, and other stakeholders. And as I referenced earlier, a unique aspect about Volpara is how passionate our staff are about our purpose. That social driver is a foundation for us. However, we also adhere to strict quality standards. We cultivate a diverse workforce. And as a New Zealand company, working towards a net zero carbon emissions is important for our future. This is our first year of ESG reporting, so you'll see more of this going forward as we continue our commitment to being an ethical and responsible company. Next slide. As part of being a responsible company, Volpara operates based on a set of values. Our ESG work gives us the chance to be bold in our choices, relentless in our pursuit of our purpose, whānau in how we engage responsibly with each other, our customers, and the world around us. Which leads me to our customers. My former Epic boss gave me this advice a few weeks ago when I told her I was being appointed Volpara's CEO. She said, "Take good care of your customers and the numbers will work out all right." That worked very well for Epic, and I expect it will work for us also. We are a global organization, and this past year has been a great year for us in forming new customer relationships. While we have customers all around the world, we've had great success in the United States, in particular in the past year. Our customer churn rate is very low, and the caliber of organizations who choose us is high. Many of the customers who've joined us in the last year would be called elephants of their region or even the industry. Some examples: Advocate Aurora, a very large US Midwestern organization; West Virginia University, a research-oriented integrated delivery network; my former employer, UNC Hospitals, UNC Health, which is an 18-campus hospital system based in North Carolina; Medical University of South Carolina; and finally, the Mayo Clinic has been a research partner of ours for years, and they have purchased Volpara Risk Pathways. All of these organizations joined our family in the last year. Next slide. Leading us to some of our highlights and our growth in accounts receivable despite COVID uncertainties, our recurring revenue, our significant growth in image data, our total revenue and subscription revenue growth in line with our software as a service operations. Our operating loss is shrinking and will continue to shrink, and we have money in the bank. Now, for more details on our financials, I'd like to ask Craig to take over and present our financials. Next slide.
Great, thanks, Teri. I'm going to touch on a few of our key points today within the presentation. Just a reminder that all the numbers I refer to are in New Zealand dollars, unless I say otherwise. On this slide, you can see the cash on hand remains solid with over $18 million in the bank at the year end. As noted in the Appendix 4E cover letter posted onto the ASX this morning, we have recently completed a $10 million revolving credit facility with Kiwibank. That's the company's primary bank in New Zealand, and the company the bank we have banked with since inception. While we don't require that additional capital at this time, it does give the company a low-cost, non-dilutionary working capital facility should we need it in the future. And this just provides us with a little more certainty around our funding for the foreseeable future and to allow us to take advantage of any opportunities as they may arise. Next slide, please, Lauren. Here you can see our revenue rose from 19.7 to $26.1 million. That's up 32% or 37% on a constant currency basis. Importantly, our subscription-based revenues continue to grow at a faster pace, and this year they grew at 37%. And that's up from 18.1 million last year to $24.8 million this year. We continue to focus on SaaS contracts and converting the remaining legacy capital customers to SaaS contracts. This has been a source of strength for Volpara over the last couple of years, as we've seen a number of AI competitors who have not or cannot move to subscription-based contracts, really struggling to maintain their pre-COVID levels of revenue, whereas Volpara has more than doubled our revenue in the same time, noting that some of that revenue of ours is inorganic. Volpara's net loss before tax improved 15%. From 19 million in FY21 to a little over 16 million in FY22. Next slide, please, Lauren. On this slide, you can see two pie charts overlaid on the top right corner. This reflects the continued change in Volpara's revenue contributions from subscription and capital revenues, with now over 95% of our revenue coming from a recurring revenue source. This also shows how we managed to close the gap where there was some reliance on capital revenues in prior years, up to 30% a couple of years ago, immediately after the acquisition of MRS, to now having almost entirely a recurring revenue base. These recurring revenues provide the business with some degree of certainty over our future revenues and cash flows, and they also allow us to plan ahead with a lot more accuracy and conviction. Next slide. Operating costs have increased 11% during the year from 39 million to 43.2 million. Excluding CRA, our costs actually decreased by 1%. If you look at the pie charts on the top right corner, you can see the expenses split. What this shows is small increases in sales and marketing, product development and engineering, and also our cost of revenue, being offset by about a 4% drop in our general and admin costs. Some of that cost reduction is one-off. However, we do believe that we're largely at a stable cost base now, where we'll be able to achieve scale without any material further investment. Another graph worth noting is the one on the bottom right, which shows our net operating cash outflow. As you can see, after the peak in FY20, shortly after the acquisition of MRS, cash outflows have reduced in FY21 to 14 million, and then even further in FY22 to 11.4. That's down 19%. Cash flow obviously remains one of the key focuses of the business. Onto the key performance metrics. So some of the key metrics called out on this slide are the gross margin or cost of revenue percentage. Volpara's gross margin has remained consistent year on year at about 91%. We consider this maintainable going forward, and we expect to finish in a range of somewhere between 90 to 92% in FY23. In the middle of the top line, you'll see a metric that we're going to start reporting more on. It's called ARPA, or Average Revenue Per Account Per Year. This measure is in US dollars, and it gives you an indication as to how we're moving upstream with our accounts, which Teri will talk more to later on. From that graph, you can see our ARPA has moved from about $17,500 in FY20 to almost $29,000 in FY22. That's an increase in the order of about 65%, and indicative of how we're targeting larger customers, which allows us to scale more efficiently than acquiring many smaller customers. On the top right, you can see our traditional ARPU metric, which, as reported in the 4C in April, has moved from $1.40 at the end of FY21 to $1.50 at the end of FY22. Another new metric we've reported in this slide deck is the graph on the bottom right, which is the difference between our annual recurring revenue and annualized revenue. ARR is as we've always reported it, whereas annualized revenue is the accounting revenue for the quarter in US dollars annualized. As you can see, there is about a $2.3 million difference currently, and that is due to various factors, including, but not limited to, customer IT delays or other system implementation delays that have impacted on the ability of Volpara to go live with our software. This difference, although not ideal, does represent material upside to our revenue numbers as and when we can overcome those delays. As in prior years, I'd just like to touch on the graph in the middle at the bottom showing Volpara's ever-growing database. As you can see, the number of images has grown significantly this year from almost 40 million in FY20 to over 60 million now at the end of FY22. This, we believe, is one of the largest databases of de-identified raw mammographic images in the cloud and continues to represent a significant opportunity for Volpara. With Rolf moving into the science and innovation role, his focus will be how to monetize this incredible asset of ours. During the year, we've made significant strides in the development of our internal research platform, allowing us to access unique insights. The platform will continue to be expanded to bring in ever more data points we have available to us as our product portfolio continues to expand. And with that, I'll hand over to Rolf to talk a bit about product and science.
Cool, thanks Craig, and hello everyone. It's great to be talking about product and science, which are subjects that have been very close to my heart now for 30 years or so, and it's great to have the time to really dedicate to really getting back into this, and as Craig just said, really getting to commercialize that incredible data set that we have. I'm just going to give a bit of a product update, and then we're going to come back to some science and some future vision for the company before Teri comes back on. Firstly, just in terms of product over FY 2022, we talked about Project FUM some time ago. Project FUM has really crystallized now into what we call Volpara Density Profile. So now, for the first time, rather than getting quite bland letters, which you see in the middle there, full of text, and buried at the bottom, having a line saying, by the way, your breast density is extremely dense. You should come back and talk to us about that. Now, for the first time, women are actually going to get their own images in the patient letter. They're going to be given the context of those images and the breast density via some little thumbnails below those images showing some comparisons. And then below that, you can see a QR code. That QR code, so the overall letter then will become much more engaging, much more compelling. And this is really part of our drive towards empowering women, but also starting to go just that little bit more, connecting more with consumers. And then at the bottom, then we've got the QR code. They can click that. They go to a Volpara website, which you see on the right-hand side there. And on that web page, they can learn all about breast density. They can scroll through those images. They can see the masking impact of breast density, as well as really learn about the risk of developing cancer as well. So this product now has been kind of built up during FY22, and it's about 2 weeks away now from formal launch, and we're looking forward to getting this out there. Now, to get this product, I'll just say a couple of things. One, they have to buy Patient Hub, which is our patient tracking system, but they also need Volpara Scorecard, which is the new name for Volpara Density. So it's a great way to drive upsells. Now, on the topic of breast density, obviously some big news recently was the European Society of Breast Imaging guidelines coming out. saying that all women in Europe should be told their breast density. That's obviously a major step forward for the women of Europe. We are still waiting for the FDA to come out with their revised standardized wording. We understand it's still being worked on, and the advocacy groups in the US are still pushing hard for it, but certainly the Europeans are now pushing ahead in this regard. Next slide, please. Okay, another big thing then during FY22 was, we talked a lot about that being the year of risk and genetics, and Teri touched on risk pathways a bit earlier. Obviously, the second part of that is genetics, and over the year we signed up deals with Natera, Invitae, Ambry, and Myriad as our genetics partners. So each individual breast imaging site has a choice of partners to go to. We've done a lot of work product-wise in generating what they call test request forms for each of those partners, and actually making this more and more electronic. Now, key thing with genetics, as with a lot of breast imaging and personalization of breast cancer screening, is not just providing the objective evidence to make decisions, but also to have a smooth IT workflow. And it's really that smooth IT workflow that Volpara has really nailed over FY22, and we look forward to more interactions and commercial benefit coming from that during FY23. So go to the next slide, please. Finally, in terms of product, Volpara Analytics has been one of our flagship products for the last 4 or 5 years. This is an enterprise-wide quality assurance system, which not only kind of spots machines which are given high radiation doses out, it can help with productivity and spot technologists that might need training and so on, as well as dramatically reducing the time it takes to prepare for things like FDA audits. Now, we've become aware over the last few years that breast imaging managers and chief technologists love the product, but the individual technologists were finding it difficult to use. So we did a lot of work in FY22 on making this a much more positive, much more engaging experience for those individual technologists, and much more kind of reward and positivity driven. And that's an example there on the right-hand side. I'm very excited to share with you then, we had 3 abstracts submitted to the big radiology show, which is coming up in December in Chicago, RSNA, all based around analytics, including ones from places like Virginia Mason, which is VMMC, showing analytics is really driving a reduction in technical recalls and really driving a reduction in technical repeats as well. All things which really help build a very compelling return on investment story for each and every site. So we are very pleased with the way analytics is going, and this whole change has been very positively received by our users. Next slide, please. Okay, so sitting behind those products, obviously, is a lot of R&D and a lot of science, albeit a lot of the science we're doing now is pretty stable because we've been in the field for some time, and we've got things to be very robust. Over the year, though, we've done a lot of updating to our algorithm around positioning. We've continued to patent. We've got a 99th and then a 100th patent, including one on breast arterial calcifications, which is one area we've been looking at. But then really sitting behind this as well is that data set which Craig touched on, is the biggest, or at least one of the biggest in the world. It is the critical raw data, which is quantitative rather than what they call the presentation data, which gets stored in packs, which is not quantitative. And it's really my job now to work with the science team to work out insights from it in short term and longer term, really drive commercialization value from that data set. Now, I just know academic research continues. One of our kind of key attributes as a company is independent research. So lots more publications. I can tell you overnight there was a couple of talks at the International Workshop on Breast Imaging over in Belgium, including one on Volpara on breast compression, which has been one of our areas of real special focus over the last few years. And that paper was extremely well received by the American and European luminaries, and got second prize in that conference. So outstanding paper, and just a great example of the real impact that we're using this data for. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the angles then on the data, and we've shown this slide before, but it's kind of worth repeating. Yeah, breast cancer screening is moving towards personalization. You can't do personalization unless you've got objective decision making in the pathway, which Volpara Density, Volpara Scorecard provides, and risk assessment and so on. But the other thing then is that smooth workflow all the way through. So some of this data, we see the future then as better prediction tools up front, predicting who's going to actually develop breast cancer, but doing that not just using 10,000 women or 20,000 women. Let's use the data we have and the millions of women that we've got to actually do prediction tools, which are a whole level above where they are today. Those women will go on to preventative strategies, and then the whole world of monitoring the breast with changes over time will open up. That'll be monitoring not just for signs of cancer, or not just signs that your prevention strategy, like tamoxifen, for example, is reducing your risk by reducing your density, but also checking for things like hormone replacement drugs not increasing density and therefore not increasing your breast cancer risk. Of course, if cancer still forms after all these preventative treatments, we want to be the leader out there in detection. And we firmly believe the future of cancer detection is not just one-time point AI for computer-aided detection. It's going to be using all the information you've got about that patient. And then all the way along, as we've touched on a bit earlier with Volpara Density Profile, we have this whole scheme about empowering women to understand their breast density, to understand the decisions that they need to make around imaging modalities and intervals to ensure they have the best chance of early detection of cancer. So with that, back to you, Teri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Exciting times ahead, and I'm really looking forward to the innovations that are going to be coming up. So, areas of focus for the next year. I am 1 month into my role as CEO, and I'll be working with our senior team on a refreshed strategy starting next week. The 4 themes that I expect will drive many of our strategic decisions are the following. Elephants. This is about focus. It means we look at how we spend our sales, marketing, support, and overall time to ensure that we're getting the very best return. And from a sales perspective, getting a good return often means you're looking carefully at the elephant type sales. Our large customer pipeline is healthy and will continue to grow. Our sales EVP, Jill Spears, is doing an excellent job leading our sales team and spearheading our efforts with success from 2022, which will continue on through 2023. I'm going to take an aside for a second. By the way, elephants was a little bit controversial. Everyone said, don't put up pictures of elephants. But I say, we're not hunting elephants. We're a company all about saving lives. So this isn't hunting, this isn't shooting anything, but I like to look at it as rounding up elephants, taking them to the very best game park they've ever seen, where their friends and their relatives line up at the gate to get in. I say that a little bit in jest, but in reality, it leads me to the second item, which is focusing on our customers' experience and customer success. It is particularly important with big customers, and as we sign ever larger contracts, we need to ensure that we can service those customers at a level that a big organization would expect. Continue our high focus on quality, service, and innovation. And in 2022, we established a new customer success team. We're launching a new customer community infrastructure called Volpara Hive, like the bees. This allows us to share best practices, but also allows customers to share with each other. Last year was a great year of learning for us as we entered the world of risk and genetics with our acquisition of CRA. So in 2023, we're going to go beyond product functionality to integrations and program development. We've got some strategic new hires from the world of risk program management on board, and we're going to take our customers by the hand and help them not just with the technical steps to get our software up and running, but shift our focus to helping our customers establish thriving programs. The third area that we're going to focus on in our strategy discussions next week is exploring ways to expand our total addressable market. Volpara risk pathways can be used to calculate risk for women before they reach mammography age. And in fact, the NCCN and ACOG both recommend a risk assessment by age 25. ACR says no later than age 30. And this is what I call upstream risk. Right now, we can move outside of mammography, outside of radiology, and enter the world of primary care. We can offer what we have to insurance companies, care managers, as we mentioned earlier, the links with genetics, and we can even use this as a foundation for addressing other types of cancers. These are new areas on our docket to explore in the strategy sessions coming up next week. And the fourth area, partnerships. We have some very strong and solid relationships established right now with X-ray vendors like GE and Fuji, with EHR vendors like Epic and Cerner, with the genetics companies, as we mentioned earlier, and other technology companies. A big topic in our strategy sessions will be determining which types of partnerships we should expand and where are opportunities to work with partners to expand our TAM and achieve our purpose of saving lives. Now you'll notice all four of these, each builds on the one before it. So we do well signing an elephant as a customer. We do well with the elephant and we create positive references. Those customers use Hive. They share great stories with each other and their neighbor elephants, which helps make our sales jobs easier, bringing in more elephant type customers. And as I mentioned earlier, another lesson learned at Epic, taking good care of your customers, the sales get easier. When all goes well, customers expand how they use our software with additional modules and going into other areas like primary care. Our install base includes some very large organizations who don't all have large deployments, so there's enormous opportunity for us to upsell and cross-sell in addition to growing into new areas. And then finally, as our customers expand, those partnerships become more important and strategic. We maintain a Switzerland-style approach, for example, with genetics partners, which is important for big organizations to have their freedom of choice. We'll continue to grow into new markets through strategic relationships with vendors like Fuji and Epic, who I know also focuses on the elephants. These relationships are often an entry into a new category of elephant. Sometimes these alignments are critical for enterprise level integrated delivery network deployments, and large joint projects give us opportunities to grow our reach and better serve our purpose. That's the end of my presentation about 2023. And I really appreciate your time and attention, and also for supporting our mission to save families from cancer. I'll open it up now for questions.
Thank you. Scott Power raised his hand. So Scott, I will allow you to speak and to ask your question to the Volpara team.
Thanks, Lauren. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much for the presentation, Teri, Ralph and Craig. Very insightful. Just a couple of questions from me. I was particularly intrigued with your comments around that change in measurement. So the average customer size going from $17,500 up to $29,000 over the last 2 years. I'm just wondering if you could give us a little bit more detail about what that average customer now looks like, and perhaps a little bit of insight into what that customer may look like in 12 months' time, given all the product development that's going on.
All right. You know, it's interesting. We've had a history of working with a lot of radiology focused customers, sales coming out of radiology departments from single sites or smaller numbers of sites. And the big change of last year and what's in our pipeline right now is that we are engaging more at an enterprise level for either larger imaging chains or integrated delivery networks that are doing enterprise selection processes. So instead of looking at what are we going to do in a single site mammography, like a breast center that's standalone, an organization that might be dozens of sites wanting to have a standard of care that they push out across all of their mammography locations. So that's the shift. And it also is, it's reflected in how we're looking at engaging our sales staff, our marketing, and even how we communicate about what our software does in terms of our track record of supporting organizations at scale and supporting program development and helping them with putting those consistent practices out across multiple sites. Is there anything that you want to add, Craig, related to the financials of this?
I think you nailed most of it. I mean, I think the only other thing to add there, Scott, was, we'll continue to see that number increasing, just like ARPU over time. It's increased 65% in the last 2 years. We are closing much larger dollar value deals than we ever used to in the past. So we expect that trend to continue. I can't give you a target, but we will continue to see that number increasing.
Great, thanks.
The other thing, the piece I'll comment is also this reflects some of the dynamics in the United States market in terms of consolidation. There are fewer small standalone sites, and a lot of organizations are either becoming part of larger radiology chains or integrated delivery networks. So we're shifting to ensure that our focus is ahead of where the market is going instead of behind it.
Great, thanks. If I can just ask another question. You mentioned customer delays in terms of installations. What sort of delays were you seeing, and what has changed perhaps in the last month or so? Are those delays becoming less evident and you're able to move much quicker?
Yeah, it's interesting. COVID certainly had an impact on resources for some of our active implementations that are happening right now, especially in areas like security, where you've got a limited number of people that have the right expertise. And if those people are sick, things just take a little bit longer. So we have, it varies. With risk pathways in particular, a lot of our customers are implementing our program alongside of a new EHR deployment. So they might sign a contract with Epic or Cerner and sign a contract with us so that they can design our solution in the workflows of the EHR. And the EHR implementation timeline is, will take anywhere from 6 months to even a couple years. And the beauty about it for us is that we are in their long-term plan and a much bigger budget. So there's a safety and a predictability in those contracts that we know we're going to be there for years. But it's not a matter of flipping a switch and turning it on over the course of a couple weeks or months, like it might be for a standalone project. So to me, it's a bit of a cost of doing business in those really big IDNs, but I think it'll pay us dividends in the long term because we're established and we're going to be there for years and years.
Great, thanks, Teri. And one last question, just in terms of guidance. Last year you provided revenue guidance, which you comfortably exceeded, so well done on that. No comment this time on guidance. Just some thoughts around that?
Yeah, we talked a lot about it internally, and we are really comfortable about where we are as a company. We're very confident about what our next year is going to be like. However, trying to pick specific numbers and give guidance at a point where I'm coming in as a new CEO and our strategic planning is happening next week felt a bit premature.
Great. Okay, thanks, Teri. That's all for me. Thanks, Lauren.
Okay.
Thank you. We also have John Hester, who has a question or two. He's raised his hand. So John, I will allow you to speak as well.
John, if you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, there we are. You talked in your presentation a lot about standardization and benchmarking of one customer versus another customer, and Ralph's focus now is on commercialization. All sounds, very, very positive, but at the technologist level, that's obviously now you've identified that as being a significant barrier to increasing utilization, which kind of sounds obvious, but would I be right in thinking that technologists are very defensive here and don't want to have their flaws pointed out? and therefore really don't understand how to use the technology. I'd suggest to you that that's been a pretty significant failure to this point. Is that a fair assessment?
It's
On behalf of Volpara.
It's an interesting question, and I'm going to ask Ralph to comment on this in a minute, but I will share with you, based on my discussions with some of our larger prospects at SBI and when I was in the US, that's part of our strategy of moving to elephants, is making a lot of the broader decision making, taking that out of the hands of individual technologists more into the broader organizations that are trying to drive to quality standards. I met with one of the largest mammography radiology, but they're one of the largest in mammography in the US. And they were telling me how difficult it is as they're growing to get people on board, to train people, and to ensure that they're doing good quality mammograms. And if it's not good quality, it's a waste of everyone's time. So quality was the first thing when I said, what is your struggle? What are you looking to get out of our time together? They said, we need a partner that can help us with quality. Now, we've done work to try to make it a better experience for those, but in the end, the people that are making the decisions and putting the software in their organizations are committed, and you see it as a really valuable tool to be able to grow in a way that they can distinguish themselves as somebody that follows high quality standards. Ralph, do you want to add more on that?
Yep, I'll just add a couple of things, Teri. Thanks for that. John, obviously, as Teri just said, we'll be targeting chief techs and breast imaging managers, really, and they're the budget holders. But we also want to improve, obviously, all the individual technologists, and that's really the kind of the wave of innovation that we're doing now. Those technologists, some of them, I think, to your point there, view it as a bit big brotherish, but really what we're seeing now at most sites is they've kind of moved away from that. And a lot of what we've done now is kind of almost gamification, so kind of made the system almost a joy for them to use. And let's always remember the technologists, the people that do the mammograms, they actually have an incredibly difficult job to do, but they're very driven to do the highest quality work, and they're very dedicated to saving families. And if you look at some of our best sites like Boca Radiology, they've always had really engaged technologists, and they do that by, for example, celebrating perfect images and so on. And we've tried to take the lessons that from sites like Boca and kind of automate it so all our sites actually have the benefit of that kind of gamification and fun and positivity. And that's really what we were doing over the last year. And there was a great quote recently from a big site, Kettering in Ohio, who the quote went something along the lines of, after installing analytics, all my technologists actually now enjoy coming to work. It's kind of taken things to a new level. It's kind of given them a whole new lease of life, individual training, and a real clear way of seeing how they're performing.
Teri, just on Ralph's comment there, how can you leverage that experience at Kettering in Ohio?
Well, one of the things that we're doing as part of that collaboration with customers is sharing those positive stories and some of that how to, both directly from one customer to another as part of our Hive community. But then also some of our strategy sessions next week are giving our marketing team more focus to ensure that when we've got customers that have a really positive message, that we've got a thoughtful and tactically appropriate way to share that message with the key decision makers and other organizations like Kettering. So, expect that you'll see, a lot of how we've talked about ourselves. And when I look at our website, it's here's what our products do, but I want to shift us more into why it matters and customer success stories. And that's part of that shifting also from, how does the technology work to program development? And, I've even told our staff, they say, that, all right, the customer is live. And I'm like, all right, that's how we've gotten started. Live isn't the end. We need to see our customers be all they can be. And that's going beyond live to thrive.
Just one more question, if I may, please, Teri. You said you took your key members of your US team to see your former colleagues at Epic, and just sort of, Epic, as I understand it, are potentially a competitor. They have somewhat of a competing electronic health record. My understanding was that while that is a basic tool, and it's certainly not specialised for mammography clinics. It's nevertheless a competitor, and some of the more sort of cost-conscious hospital or healthcare systems have deferred or not taken up Volpara's technology because they've been forced to use Epic systems. Is that a correct assumption? And what were your key motivations for introducing the Volpara team to the Epic team?
When you look at the, good question, by the way, when you look at the entire platform of products that we provide, there's only one area that overlaps in any way with Epic, and that's our patient hub. You know, it was one of the products that was part of the MRS acquisition. Epic, as a vendor, is very horizontal. It wants to cover all aspects of the patient's journey across all specialties, across lab, radiology, primary care, etc. And Epic does have a mammography information system that is an integrated part of the Epic suite. However, Epic doesn't offer PACS. Epic doesn't do anything related to image analysis. Epic doesn't do anything on density. And when you ask an Epic customer, how do you do risk assessment? The odds are going to be high that they'll say we use the Epic tool, but what they mean by the Epic tool is actually our Volpara risk pathways risk assessment, because we are by far more integrated into Epic workflows for doing risk than any other vendor out there. Okay. So when we met with Epic, Epic was not at all concerned about us being a competitor. The CEO, the head of the clinical systems, the people in charge of the radiology and the mammography development system, they had no concerns about meeting with us. And the end result that with us collaborating with Epic is that an Epic site may not put in our patient hub, but they can put in absolutely everything else and be happier with their Epic install than they would be without us. By the way, the other benefit of bringing them there was Epic's got a phenomenal culture, and their emphasis on having fun, executing in a way that's very profitable and focused on valuing their time, and how they engage with customers is something I wanted our staff to see.
Okay, well, it's food for another discussion. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, John. So I've received a couple of questions, which I'll actually combine because we've got talking about the opportunity in Europe post the European Society of Breast Imaging recommendation and what the opportunity for Volpara is there versus on the flip side, the progress from FDA on implementing a public breast density screening program, which has been a little slower than it was hoped. So wanting to get an understanding of what Volpara is doing from an engagement perspective to proactively move them along. Big questions.
Yeah, I'm like, which pictures to take first? So first of all, in terms of USOBI in Europe, obviously that's a major step forward for women in Europe, and we absolutely want to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. Now, with me being 1 month into the role, I'm relooking at our approach to Europe, and we're going to be talking about that more in our meetings in the next couple weeks. It's a huge market, but it does take a long time to move and a fair amount of effort. And you probably heard me use the word profitability a few times. Most of the conversations that I have with our staff when we're talking about areas of focus include us getting to a point of bringing in more than we spend. So we have to be really careful if we're going into new markets that we're doing it in a way that doesn't conflict with our goals of becoming profitable, yet we don't want to lose out on opportunities. So that's one that you'll probably hear more from us in another 3 to 4 months. But right now it's an area that we're evaluating. In terms of the FDA, I think we're too small, honestly, to lobby directly. However, the fourth item of my 2023 focus areas of partnerships is the area that I think gives us the most potential to be able to help move the needle with the FDA. So we've been speaking with some large organizations, probably can't can't say their names. Big ones that you would know both in healthcare and in technology. And I, in fact, met with somebody who 2 days later was actually meeting with Biden about the moonshot. And so our goal is to continue to relentlessly advocate for women to know their density and help educate everyone we can on the reasons why this is important. And then be able to provide lots of good supporting science-backed information so that those that are in those conversations more directly than us are armed with appropriate information. Anything that you would like to add, Ralph or Craig?
Yeah, just touching on that last point, Terry. In the US, yeah, we do a lot of work with women's advocacy groups like Dense Breast Info in particular, who are pretty powerful. We're providing them with the information, and they are doing the lobbying of the FDA and actually the state legislators, right across the US, and they've been extremely successful at doing that. So that really is our avenue to the FDA.
All right. Did we answer that question enough?
I think so. And if we do have any follow-up, Emily and Adem, feel free to shoot through any follow-up if you would like. But that concludes the Q&A portion of today's call. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And Teri, if you would like to provide some closing remarks.
Sure. I have to say, it's an honor to be leading this company. It is a unique company, and I've worked with multiple technology companies as part of my consulting and in my career. And I've really never seen a company that is so focused on the purpose, but also so very driven by making an impact through our science, through our technology, through research and advocating for women everywhere. So I see our raw materials in terms of the technology that we have out there, the products that are out there. Also, the intelligent, dedicated, and focused staff. And then also the really prestigious, really well-respected customer base that we have right now. Those three ingredients, I think, are a fantastic foundation for us to grow and to do really well as a company. So I'm looking forward to the next year.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely Thursday.
Thank you.